It's time for some custom hooks. We've got on the home page a map and you can zoom it around. So we start in Niagara Falls. We're going to zoom up to say Toronto. Maybe we go and add a house, we pop back to the home page. Boom, we're back in Niagara Falls. We're like a tourist always wanting to go back to Niagara Falls every time, even though it's sort of average. So what we want to do in this video is create our own custom hook for storing state that will sort of synchronize that state in local storage so that when the user comes back, instead of starting with the fresh default value every time, it will use the default value that was stored or last synced into local storage. We're also going to learn a little bit about TypeScript generics. We've been using them throughout this whole video, but now we're going to create our own. So this video will be pretty short, but it packs a lot of info into this small video. So open up a couple pages. First is index. So this is where and we're in the pages index. This is the home page right here, which contains the map. So you'd want to actually be in this map here. So head on over into components map. So this use state here is where we initialize it to a latitude of 43, longitude of -79. That's great for like a starting point, but what we're actually going to do is modify this to use our own custom hook instead, which will allow us to reuse that value that we stored in local storage. So hold this page open for a second, or this file open for a second, and we're going to go down into the utils folder into one called use local state and just uncomment this here. So here's where we're going to define our custom hook. So we're going to export a function and we're going to call it use local state. And use local state receives two pieces of information. So normally state receives one, the initial value. We're going to receive a key and we're going to give it a type of string because we need to basically, we might have multiple of these being used and we need to differentiate one from another. The variable that we're storing in local state. And the second value will be the initial value that we receive. Now the problem is, what type is this? We're defining this hook, this function, but we don't know necessarily how the user is going to use it. And use state itself had the same problem, which is why you can sort of pass the hint to it of what type of data this initial value is going to be. So we're saying that is going to be a type of view state. So this is on the using end. We're now on sort of the creating end, and we need to define how this happens. So yeah, you could say YOLO like any. So YOLO, instead of typing any, I redefined in here, type YOLO equals any. This is when you're like, I don't know, it's in any, YOLO. But that's not great, right? That means you're sort of just giving up on TypeScript and you're saying anything's good, but I can't provide you any type help after that. So instead what you can do is you can come in here and add angly brackets and you can say, I'm going to create a generic called S. Often they use single letters. I don't know why it doesn't really have any special meaning. You could have it be something longer, but we're going to say S. When it's not passed, we're just going to say undefined. But now we can say the initial is going to be S. So whatever they pass the caller in these angle brackets, that's what I'm going to take on over here. So good, we're inside of the use local state function. And now we need to basically define, we need to set our state, but we need to load it from local storage and all of that. So that's what we're going to work on right now. So we're going to start by saying const, and we're going to just declare some state. So we're going to say value and set value. And then we're going to use the use state hook. So the same one that just comes from React. But we're going to pass along S, the generic that we created. And we're going to pass this along to this use state so that it now knows the same type that we have access to. So the useState hook, you can pass in a hard-coded value like 5, and but you can also pass a function that gets called instead. So it will call this function when it's initializing itself for the first time. And this is what we're going to do. Inside of here, we're going to basically check, do we have this key in local storage? If so, use its value. Otherwise, use whatever the initial value is that was passed here. So what we're going to do is just to check first. First, we need to check to make sure, let's make sure we're running in the client and not on the server, because Next.js does some server-side rendering. So to do that, we're going to say type of window is not equal to undefined. And let's just double check that we have window.local storage, because it's possible maybe a browser has turned it off or not given you access or something like that. So with this in place, we sort of know that we have access to local storage. Let's try to load the saved value from the window.local storage. So we do that by calling the getItem function, and we're going to get it with the key. So it might not exist, so we need to check to see if there's a saved value. So if saved, and finally, if that's the case, we're going to return this value, but we can't return it as is. It stores in local storage everything as a JSON string, so we need to parse it. So parse the saved value and return that. So if we get to the bottom here and we haven't returned out of this function, at this point we're just going to return the initial value like this. So what we've done here is it looks sort of crazy with all these brackets and everything, but we've used the useState hook to load the initial value from local storage. So at this point we can just return it. So return value and set value. And we're going to give it a little bit of a type hint because it doesn't seem to get it on its own. So we're just going to say as type of value and type of set value, so that the receiver of this will receive things in the proper type. So this is whatever S happens to be, and then whatever set value happens to be, which is the dispatch function with S. Okay, so that will read it from local storage, but the problem is we're not writing changes to this state back to local storage. So for that, we're going to use the useEffect hook. So the side effect of the state value changing is that we're going to write its value to local storage. So we're going to say useEffect. Here's our useEffect function. When should this be called? When the value changes. And what are we going to do? So after checking to make sure that window does have local storage, we are going to just write that value to local storage. So we're going to say window.localstorage.setItem, and we're going to set it with a certain key that was passed in here at the top, and we need to stringify the value. Deshawn.stringify, because you can't write objects to local storage, it has to be a string. So we're going to stringify the value like this. So now it's initialized from local storage and changes are written to local storage. Perfect. So now we can go back to the map, import our useLocalState hook, and then we're just going to come down and update this state right here to use our own. So it's useLocalState, and it's failing because we need to pass in a key. So we can call this the viewport, just like that. And now TypeScript is good. And because we did this generic where we're passing in, hey, the state I'm going to be giving you is viewState. Now when I come back here, it knows that viewport is viewState, and this is a dispatch set state call that wants to receive viewState. So let's go take a look at the map. And it actually brought me somewhere in California, I believe, because I had a previous value saved here. So we're just going to clear this out. So you go into your developer tools application, local storage. We're just going to delete, we can delete everything. Gone. So we're going to reload this. Because the state changed and when I went back, it went back to California. So I want to be in Toronto. So let's just fly across the country. Where am I? Zoom into Toronto. Cool. So now the map should stay here if everything worked correctly. So if I were to refresh, I should be in Toronto. Maybe I zoom in a little. I click on add house. I go back. I'm at the exact same location because it's initializing itself from what's stored in local storage. So if I were to pop this back open and go look at our local storage, see this viewport here? Just pull up this value. So here's what it's storing in local storage. It's storing all of the details about my state. And every time I move this around, you can see how it's getting updated because the use effect hook is triggering changes to state being written to local storage. So that's all I wanted to show in this video. And it's important because in the next upcoming videos, it's time to go and query all of the houses that are within the bounding box of this map and display them on the home page. But before I did that, I wanted to remember where the map was positioned so that as we're making changes, it's not always resetting itself to wherever you've hard-coded the initial value of this map. Hope you enjoyed this video. See you on the next one.